Hello viewer and welcome to Worldview, a program designed to bring you up to speed with trending developments the world over. My name is Xavier Robert, reaching you live from Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital. And on our top stories today, fighting reportedly resumes in Gaza immediately after expiry date of week-long truce between Israel and Hamas. Conservative Prime Minister Christopher Luxon says cell phones will be banned in schools across New Zealand as his fledgling government looks to turn around the country's plummeting literacy rate. Seoul's defense ministry says South Korea will launch its first military spy satellite early Saturday on a SpaceX rocket, intensifying space race on the peninsula after Pyongyang launched its first military eye in the sky last month. Details of these stories and more in a moment. First on Worldview today, fighting has reportedly resumed in Gaza today, immediately after the expiry of a week-long truce between Israel and Hamas. Israel's military said fighter jets were currently striking Hamas targets in Gaza. Meanwhile, Marwan al-Hams, the director of Al-Najah Hospital in Rafah in southern Gaza, where many Palestinians fled after being told by Israel to leave the north to the territory, said strikes killed at least 9 people in the city, including 4 children. Moving on now, Iran has blamed Israel and the United States for a resumption of fighting in the Gaza Strip. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani said in a post on X, formerly Twittered, that after killing more than 15,000 Palestinians, the Zionist vampires have started a new round of killing under the continued support of the American government, reportedly. Now, reports say that deadly fighting restarted in Gaza today, immediately after the expiration of a 7-day truce between Israel and Iran-backed Hamas militants. Kanani added that the political and legal responsibility for the continuation of the aggression and massacre rests with Israel, the U.S., and a few governments that support the apartheid regime. Now, recall that yesterday the U.S. top diplomat Antony Blinken, meeting Israeli and Palestinian officials, called for the pause in hostilities to be extended and warned that any resumption of combat must protect Palestinian civilians. Moving on now, a spokesperson for the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health, Dr. Ashraf Al-Qudra, has said that 14 people have been killed and dozens injured by Israeli strikes in Gaza today. Al-Qudra said the majority of those killed were women and children. A statement from the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Interior said Israeli strikes had resumed across Gaza earlier today after a temporary truce between the militant group and Israel ended. A separate development, the UN says the resumption of fighting between Israel and Hamas is the nightmare that everyone utterly feared. Early today, a temporary ceasefire between the two warring sides expired, with both blaming each other for the resumption of hostilities. Since then, the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says more than 100 people have been killed. James Elder, a spokesman for UNICEF, told media the renewed clashes are catastrophic for the people of Gaza. Elder said Nasser Hospital, which he described as the biggest functioning one in Gaza, was wildly overflowing with children and people with wounds of war recovering from the last attack. He described how many families had been sleeping on mattresses at the hospital for weeks. In a separate development, Conservative Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has said that cell phones will be banned in schools across New Zealand as his fledgling government looks to turn around the country's plummeting literacy rates. Reports say that New Zealand schools once boasted some of the world's best literacy scores, but levels of reading and writing have declined to the point that some researchers fear there is a classroom crisis. Luxon declared he would ban phones at schools within his first 100 days in office, adopting a policy trialed with mixed results in the United States, United Kingdom and France. Luxon said the move would stop disruptive behavior and help students focus. In a separate development, Seoul's defense ministry has said that South Korea will launch its first military spy satellite early Saturday on a SpaceX rocket, intensifying a space race on the peninsula after Pyongyang launched its first military eye in the sky last month. A defense ministry official told reporters today that Seoul's reconnaissance satellite, carried by one of Elon Musk's SpaceX Falcon 9 rockets, will lift off from the Vandenberg U.S. Space Force Base in California at 0319 Seoul time. The reports say that SpaceX released a photo of its Falcon 9 rocket erected vertically on the launch pad with the letters Korea emblazoned across it. If it is successfully put into orbit, South Korea will have acquired its first domestically built spy satellite to monitor nuclear-armed North Korea. Seoul plans to launch 4 additional spy satellites by the end of 2025 to bolster its reconnaissance capacity over the north. Moving on now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said defenses must be quickly beefed up across the front line after meeting commanders in some of the main pressure points in the south and east. He stated this in his nightly address. Russian forces are trying to encircle the eastern town of Avdiivka, and they are targeting the southern regions of Kherson and Zaporizhia. Overnight, Ukraine's Air Force said it had shot down 18 out of 25 Russian drones and 1 of 2 cruise missiles. With temperatures falling below freezing and Ukraine cloaked with snow, President Zelensky has said winter as a whole is a new phase of war. The Ukrainian leader said maximum attention would be paid to eastern towns coming under fire in the Donetsk region, as well as a key defensive line in the northeast between Kupiansk and Lyman. He also included the region around the capital Kyiv, where fortifications would be bolstered. President Zelensky's emphasis on strengthening defensive lines may lend weight to fears of an increasingly frozen conflict, despite some continued fierce fighting. Ukraine counteroffensive since the summer is widely viewed as having failed to quickly deliver hoped-for gains. The frontline morale on both sides will hinge to some extent on how well soldiers are equipped to cope with these colder months. The military said 20 attacks had been repelled near Avdiivka alone, and villages had come under attack around Bakhmut. Meanwhile, Russia's Federal Security Service (FSB) has arrested a man with dual Russian-Italian citizenship for conducting sabotage operations for Ukrainian military intelligence. Moscow said today that the suspect had carried out bomb attacks on railways after being recruited by Kiev earlier this year. Infrastructure and production facilities across Russia have been damaged in unclaimed attacks since its military forces invaded Ukraine in February 2022, with investigators opening dozens of cases. The suspect is accused of planting explosives to derail a 15-carriage train in the Ryazan region, southeast of the capital, in early November. The FSB also says that he bombed the Diaghilevo military airfield in July, according to state news. The intelligence agency said that the suspect was recruited by Ukrainian military intelligence in Istanbul in February. He then received sabotage training from Latvian special services in the EU and NATO member states, it added. The statement also said that a search of the suspect's home unearthed explosives and other bomb-making equipment, and investigations are underway to establish his role in other acts of sabotage. The highest-profile Ukrainian attack on Russian infrastructure since the start of the war came in October 2022, when the Kerch Strait bridge linking the Crimean Peninsula with Russia was bombed. Shortly after the blast, the FSB arrested 5 Russians and 3 others who were citizens of Ukraine and Armenia. In a related development, Alexei Navalny, Russia's jailed opposition leader, said he has been informed of new criminal charges against him. The Kremlin critic, who is already serving a 19-year sentence, said on social media today that he had additionally been charged under Article 214 of the Penal Code, which covers vandalism. Navalny, aged 47, is already serving sentences totaling more than 30 years on charges including extremism, which he denies, and has spent much of the last 2 years in solitary confinement for a range of alleged misdemeanors. The vandalism charge could add up to another 3 years to his sentence, Navalny said, citing a letter he had received from Russia's investigative committee in prison. In September, he lost his appeal against the 19-year prison term, which was imposed on August 4, after he was convicted on 6 charges related to alleged extremist activity, all of which he denied. After the break, heavy gunfire was reported in Guinea-Bissau's capital today, hours after some National Guard soldiers went to free a detained minister and a senior state official. Stay joined to us for details on this and more right after this breather.
For premium broadcasts and entertainment, sports on the go, and news from the world. Watch Spectrum TV on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and free-to-air frequency 12733. Visit our website, spectrumtv.ng. Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the matters counsel is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but you can't be talking about cases which are in court,
Is
my
this
lord.
an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord. I think I would
being in consequence.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
Hey, thanks for staying tuned. Cameroon's Health Minister Dr. Manauda Malaki has urged the population to trust the government's health policy amid growing skepticism over the malaria vaccines which arrived to the country some days ago. In a statement, Malaki of the testing phase in Kenya, Ghana and Malawi, the health minister said based on the efficacy of the results obtained, the introduction of the vaccine will make it possible to cover the entire childhood and, depending on the coverage rate, avoid about 2,000 deaths among children under 5 years of age every year. According to the World Health Organization, Cameroon records 6 million malaria cases with 4,000 deaths in health facilities every year. Moving on now, the Somali authorities say more than 1 million people have now been forced to abandon their homes in the country due to floods caused by the El Niño weather phenomenon. This comes as world leaders gather in Dubai to discuss the climate crisis at the COP28 summit. At least 270 people are reported to have died in Somalia, Kenya and southern Ethiopia as the continental region, which is just coming out of prolonged drought, braces for further torrential rains. According to the reports, in Somalia alone, more than 100 people have died in flash floods. In a separate development, Tanzania has signed a deal for one of East Africa's biggest land-based carbon credit projects. The project covers 6 national parks spanning 1.8 million hectares. Tanzania, which has forest resources of nearly 48 million hectares, has emerged as one of the leading African players in the global carbon credit trade. The announcement comes as world leaders are meeting in Dubai for the COP28 summit aimed at finding ways to tackle climate change. Reports say that carbon credit projects involve polluting companies promising to pay other organizations to reduce their emissions of greenhouse gases or to remove them from the atmosphere. The new deal is an alliance between Tanzania's National Park Management Agency, TANAPA, and Carbon Tanzania, a locally based company. Moving on now, heavy gunfire was reported in Guinea-Bissau's capital this morning, hours after some National Guard soldiers went to free a detained minister and a senior state official. Members of the National Guard took the officials before seeking refuge in barracks south of the capital. Special forces then intervened after attempts to negotiate failed, resulting in an exchange of gunfire. Calm is said to have been, however, restored later. The reports have it that the leader of the group of soldiers who were trying to free the 2 men is now being held by the army and the situation is completely under control. Finance Minister Suleiman Saidi and Antonio Monteiro, the Secretary of State for the Treasury, had been detained amid investigations into the alleged irregular withdrawal of $10 million. That is about £8 million of state funds. They were questioned on Thursday afternoon by an anti-corruption inquiry to clarify the payments to 11 companies. In a parliamentary session on Monday, the leader of the country's main opposition party alleged that the owners of the companies were close to leaders of the country's governing coalition. Moving on now, United States presidential candidate Ron DeSantis and California Governor Gavin Newsom have faced off in a television debate billed as a potential preview of the 2028 presidential race. The matchup between DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and Newsom, an ally of President Joe Biden, who is widely expected to mount a future White House bid, was filled with policy clashes and personal insults. DeSantis labeled Newsom a liar in charge of a failing state, while Newsom ridiculed his Florida rival as a bully who is badly losing to Republican presidential rival Donald Trump. DeSantis labeled Newsom a sleek, slippery politician whose state is failing. He said, in his words, people are leaving California in droves. The host touted the 90-minute event as the Great Red versus Blue State debate. The debate, hosted by Sean Hannity, was held in a television studio with no audience in Georgia, a key swing state. In a separate development, the United Nations Annual Climate Summit is underway in Dubai, with world leaders approving a climate disaster fund that will help vulnerable nations cope with the impact of drought, floods, and rising seawater. The agreement marked a positive signal of momentum at the start of the 2023 conference known as COP28. Its host, UAE's Sultan Al Jaber, said in the opening ceremony on Thursday. Al Jaber, who is the UAE's Minister of Industry and also heads the national oil companies chairing the summit for its 28th meeting. His leading role has drawn backlash from critics who believe his oil ties should disqualify him from the climate post. In opening remarks, Al Jaber made the case that the world must proactively engage fossil fuel companies in phasing out emissions, pointing to progress by some national oil companies in adopting net zero targets for 2050. The UN's climate chief, Simon Steele, gave a more stark assessment, saying there must be a terminal decline to the fossil fuel era if they are interested in